I knew this would happen. You marry a dame with 3 kids, you buy a big house with mortgages up to your ass, you change your religion and you forget about business. Great. Really great. Hello, usual your fanatic Nate coming at you to basically start my reviews of Amityville movies, all of the ones that I've basically seen / own, which aren't a whole terrible, whole hell of a lot, but I'm gonna basically, over the next coming whatever days and weeks, rewatch and review the Amityville movies that I own. First one being, of course, the original movie, the Amityville Horror, from I think 79 it came out, if I'm correct. And also at the end of the review, I'm going to be reviewing this, just the first Blu-ray of the first movie, or whatchamacallit. Scream Factory put this out in, I don't know if it was 2013, which was an Amityville Horror trilogy, which I was very excited about at the time and still am. Included a 3D Blu-ray of the third movie, which I've already reviewed the Blu-ray of, but I'll talk about again in my review of the Amityville 3D. But basically, for the first 3 films, I'm gonna review the DVD, or the Blu-ray rather, of each of the, Shout Factory Blu-rays included in this collection. I'm pretty sure this is still available, for purchase, and I would highly recommend it. Basically, especially for just being able to actually experience the third movie in 3D if you've got the setup or whatever. So basically, Amityville Horror is something that I got into when I was 14. In the spring of 1991, I don't know why. I mean, obviously I was still am, I always will be for the rest of my life, but I was, this was the very, very beginning of starting to get into horror. I started to get into horror really in a big way, basically from 12. So I mean, this is only like the 3rd year of me really getting into horror and discovering all of these horror movies that had existed for the years prior and stuff. And at the time, Amityville Horror was, just over 10 years old. So this is something that, it's funny because, I mean, kind of paranormal movies have never been my forte, but something about Amityville Horror I don't know, I just really liked, I guess the house to me was just really cool. And I guess at that point, being 3 years into, discovering horror and stuff and being more a fan of physical killers and stuff, I guess Amityville Horror was a little bit of, although I'd seen Poltergeist, I think, by this time. It was just, I guess it was different to have, supernatural goings on versus, just a physical killer and stuff. So, I love the way the movie starts with the basically this guy killing his family and stuff, which is the second movie, of course, will cover more in depth of that. But the way the movie starts is really cool and creepy, and of course in horror movies I love it, in Friday the 13th movies and stuff, or horror movies in general, when it's like thunderstorm and raining. I think that atmosphere is just absolutely just key and absolutely fantastic for horror movies, and is really done and well at the beginning of this movie, beginning and end. Should be said, but the beginning of the movie, it doesn't delve too much or make too big a deal about it, but basically we see, a figure, a person going through this house, and then thunderstorm at the beginning of the movie, just shooting family members. We'll see the crime scene moments later, and we'll be, I can't remember exactly when this the thing on the screen, I think, that says, I don't know if it's known how early in the movie it's known that it's like this, the child killed the siblings and mom and dad and stuff like that, or whatever, the oldest boy or whatever. But basically then we're introduced to this cigar smoking detective guy who will later on show up in the movie, and and we just cut to sometime later where James Brolin and Margot Kidder are checking out the house. Obviously it's, at the beginning of the movie it's being sold for a very low price because it's, whatever, haunted and no one frickin' wants the house. So we're basically introduced to James Brolin and Margot Kidder, and Margot Kidder is, we don't get to see topless, but we do get to see some, I don't know, interior side boob, if you will. So I didn't know that she was so naturally well endowed in that area until seeing this movie. It's all the baggy 70s clothes of Superman and stuff. You don't really necessarily know, what's underneath, the goods underneath. So she was kind of, Yeah, she was kind of well-to-do or whatever. Chesterly. Anyway, I've got to continue another aspect of this movie, but it's kind of a, I mean, it's 79 and it's, if you're used to slasher movies, obviously, this isn't going to be your fare, even if you're used to, if you want body count, because I don't think anyone dies except for at the beginning of the movie, if I'm remembering correctly. This is really kind of a slow crawl, kind of a basic, well, it's a haunted house movie basically, so it's not big on body count or really even that horrific of things going on, on camera. It's more of like the, in the sense of what Paranormal Activity would end up being, where it's more like psychological, even though I don't know how the hell those movies, went on to do as many as they did of that, but those movies are just a laugh compared to this. And a lot of people don't really like this movie as well, and to each their own or whatever. I mean, I mean, I like this movie, and granted, a lot of it's probably because I grew up with it. There's always just some kind of a extra aura of just, I don't know what, just familiarity, or just whatever that goes with the movie you grew up with, because you always, generally in my experience, even if you're older, you always kind of see it in the same light as you did when you were a kid, or at least you're reminded of how you saw it as a kid when you first saw it, every time you rewatch it, and granted, you probably see it, things more as an adult and stuff, but like I say, you can still see it through those eyes. The story in the movie is this George Lutz, played by whatever his name is. What's his name? James Brolin basically married this Margot Kidder character, which already had 3 kids, presumably from a previous marriage or just previous man or men or whatever. And this is the first time her family had ever bought a house. There's always a bunch of renters, and the way she talks sometimes where her lips don't really connect, it's just like, come on, George, this is a big event in my family. Like her lips, generally when you say family, like your lips close or whatever, and she's like, come on, George, it's a big event in my family. Anyway, I'm just thinking out loud at this point. But basically that's the dynamic. I mean, George Lutz has basically married this woman and taken, basically becoming a father figure to the 3 kids. I mean, there's no mention of the actual real dad being any kind of part of the kids' lives or anything like that. But one thing that I will say that I've always loved about this movie is basically the house they shot it in. And the sequels, they talk about the interiors being shot at some sound stage in Mexico and shit. I don't know if that's the same thing that they did with the original movie or not. I would imagine it's a possibility. And all of the exteriors were just filmed at this, real location, and all the interiors are just done in that's probably the case, because 2 and 3 were done, the interiors of the house were actually a set. It was shot in Mexico, so I don't know whether or not that's the case with this movie or not. But when you're a teenager, you don't know all that shit, and even rewatching it now, I mean, it's really convincing and stuff. So that's one of the things I really liked about the movie, is the way, the kind of the way the house looks, and the way of just the house being scary. I mean, I'd always see that cover at a video stores and stuff, in the house with the eye, or the windows that look like eyes and this kind of stuff. And they even put like lighting so it looks like the eyes look mean, or the window eyes look mean and stuff like that. So I mean, a big part of this reason why I like this movie is just the creepy house and stuff like that. And ever since I was 14, that was one thing that I really liked. But anyway, what I was saying is just the house for me always played a huge part of the movie, and just really cool. What I think is so funny about this movie is, like, obviously their new family in the house or whatever, and I think the Margot Kidder character, like, asked this priest or whatever. And don't let me forget to mention Rod Steiger is probably one of the best things about this movie. He does a couple performance pieces in this movie where he's yelling and he's frustrated and stuff, and it's really great acting in my opinion. Well, all 3 of them, I think, James Brolin, Margot Kidder, and Rod Steiger are all really, really, really good in this movie. And for people who don't like this movie, I don't know if they're not even taking into account the performances that I think are pretty good. But Rod Steiger shows up early on in the movie to bless the house, and ends up being, you know, the famous scene with the flies, and has to leave, and it's like, blah! You know, luckily we don't see it, but he's basically, you know, the house makes religious people throw up, and then not long later, like, Margot Kidder's character's aunt comes around, and she's a freaking nun, and she has to get out of the house only to, like, you know, screech to a halt driving away on the freaking road to open the door and go, that was something me and my dad always laughed at her, you know, basically opening up the car door, and just that particular actress's, you know, fake portrayal of throwing up, just basically going, oh, so funny. So I mean, this movie's funny in the sense that, I mean, there are really strong performances and stuff, but there's also really fake shit in it too, and it's just like, usually if there's a movie with as strong performances in it as there are in this, usually it doesn't go that full range of the gauntlet to be so laughable at moments as well. So whatever. So I mean, that's the movie. I mean, it's a slow progression of things just going wrong, and this whatever, and this and that, and you know, from the very beginning of the movie, the Rod Steiger's, you know, pastor priest character is negatively affected, and basically spends I don't think he ever comes back, but he's just, you know, he spends the rest of the movie trying to recover from, or not the rest of the movie, but part of the early part of the movie, recovering from his having been at the house, only to, you know, and she's trying to communicate with this guy on the phone, and it's always staticky, and he can never interact on the phone, and at one point she's just pleading, come, please bless the house, Father, please. And it's just like, and later on he does this goofy prayer thing or whatever at the church or whatever, and he just becomes stricken down with, you know, his eyesight becomes whatever, and effed up. And one of the standout scenes for me doesn't even involve the family or the house. It's the frickin' scene where Rod Steiger's, you know, being confronted by these higher echelon frickin' religious kooks, where he's really a great performance right there, where he's like, I'm a trained psychotherapist, I know, you know, I can tell the difference between something paranormal and a bad clam. That's like really great performance and really goofy dialogue at the same time. But very briefly in that scene, the guy who played like the mayor from the first two John movies, I want to say it's like Murray Hamilton or something, plays this big wig, you know, higher echelon religious, you know, authoritative asshole in that scene. He's always, poor guy, like, he's always just playing an asshole, corrupt asshole, that Murray Hamilton or whatever. But like I say, I just want to, you know, stress, I just can't stress enough how good, like, some of Rod Steiger's performances in this movie, you know, as this priest or whatever the hell he is, are. So obviously, you know, if you've read the book, I mean, the book was supposed to have been this huge, big, you know, famous thing before the movie came out. So a lot of people probably know the outcome of the movie, but obviously I hadn't read, well, it's not obvious, but I hadn't read the book before I saw the movie. So obviously, if you haven't read the book, you know, the stakes are a lot higher, in the sense that as the movie progresses, Dad seems to be just going further and further into the depths of insanity, and just, you know, towards the end of the movie, where I really like the last bit of the movie where he's kind of like I think everyone's gone or whatever, and he's just doing this and that, chopping wood, tying, you know, storms come when he's tying, you know, securing the boat in the boathouse and doing all this kind of stuff, and Margot Kidder comes home and sees, you know, him, you know, in the rain approaching the house wielding the axe, and I think at that point, you know, she thinks that she did a little bit of investigating towards the end of the movie, and realizes that, you know, the person that, you know, the family that lived there before, prior to them, you know, the older son had gone basically crazy and killed the family and stuff. And just the one thing I think is kind of fake about this movie is that, you know, the kid is basically a picture. We see a picture of the kid in the newspaper, and it's just a shot of frickin' James Brolin. You know, it's just, that's one thing that I think is really fakey about the movie, is he looks exactly like, you know, a grown man's not going to look like a, you know, early 20-something kid or whatever with the beard and stuff. That was a little leap of stretch, a leap of whatever you want to call it, reality. But the end of the movie to me is, I can still, every time I watch it, I still see it as a 14-year-old seeing it for the first time and being really kind of scared about, the outcome of the movie. Obviously, the movie plays like he's basically going to kill the kids and stuff until there's this confrontation where, Margot Kidder's character, attacks him, is like, and then he turns around and like, and he, in the book it was all like, I have read some of the books since, but since I'm not a big reader, I don't think I made it through it, but there was this thing about him seeing his wife older or whatever, and they do that briefly in the movie at this point, where he like swings the axe towards her and hits the ground next to her or whatever, and at that point she's like, don't hurt my babies, and he comes out of it, and I don't think his intent ever was to kill the kids, he was just looking for them or something. But there's this scene, this bit later on where he's had the axe and he's like, Amy, calling for the daughter in a way that could be seen as, whatever, like dangerous, or I'm going to kill you or whatever, but was probably just written off as being just a, another kind of a fake. Something presented as one way, trying to lead you to believe he was, looking for the killer, when in fact he was just trying to find the kids for whatever reason. I mean, we don't know why, but I do think that the end of the movie still holds up during the storm and everything like that, when they're trying to escape the house, and the bleeding walls and stuff is a little, like, maybe 14, I thought maybe it was a little cooler than it is, but it's really not that big a deal. But for me, the end of the movie still holds up and still works, and except for the thing where they're all safe, driven away, and it's like, what about the dog? But as I said in reviews past, for me, I think I said it in The Shining, one of the things that really works, or that's really creeps me out about movies, and scary movies in particular, is when the characters in the movie are actually portrayed as being generally scared. And I think that's what happened several times throughout this movie with like Margot Kidder, and just screaming at the top of her lungs when George goes back to run for the dog, and she's like, no, So when I see people just generally distressed or scared in movies in a way that I think goes beyond just the traditional like it really creeps me out, and that happens several times in this movie. And that one bit, remember when the clock in the middle of the night turns to like 3:15 and she's like, she was shot in the head, and she just wakes up screaming. I mean, that's, admittedly it's like a cheap jump scare bit, but I mean, it's really kind of a cool bit. It should also be said that the music in this movie is absolutely fantastic, done by that, I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name, but his son would go on to make that movie called Abominable, which I've actually reviewed already on this channel. And because his son did the movie, he actually got his dad to do the music for that movie. And the movie's really not that great. Well, watch my review of Abominable to see my thoughts on that movie. But the guy who did the music for this guy has done a lot of music for classic movies like Bullet and all kinds of great movies and stuff. But the music is really good in this movie, and is one of the big things about, which really lends to the character of this movie and the house and stuff, kind of like the la 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 la. Anyway, you probably love to hear my renditions of movie themes and stuff, so I'll stop. But that's pretty much all all I've got to say that I can really think of at this time of this movie. I'm not going to necessarily say it's a 3-star movie, but just because of seeing it when you're 14 and really always seeing it in a lot of ways as that for the rest of my life, or for since then. I mean, it really just I do like the character. I don't know why this movie gets a lot of flack, because I do like just the characters. I think watching the family interplay and the kids interplay and all this stuff, I think it's relatively realistic and interesting on repeat viewings. Obviously, I've known this movie's been a part of my life since 1991, so I've gotten several incarnations of it over the years. And what I was saying is, it might not be a 3-star movie, but I think I'm going to give Amityville Horror 3 stars out of 4 stars. Just because of the sentimental aspect attached to it. But I don't think it's a bad movie. I also don't think it's a bad movie. I think that in particular the music and the scary stuff and the haunted house aspect, if you will, I think is pulled off really relatively well. So what I want to show you now is, before I get to this, which is the the Amityville Horror Trilogy 3-disc thing, Blu-ray set released by Shout. I just want to show you my other incarnations of this movie, just to show you that in fact over the years I have been a fan of this movie. I think this is the very first DVD that came out in 2000, which has got standard and widescreen, standard on one side, widescreen on the other. And it should be said that I don't think the widescreen is anamorphic. It's back in the early, late 90s when not everything was anamorphic yet. But this is the first DVD of it, which is, to show you that I am in fact a fan of this movie and have been over the years. And this came out around the time of the remake. This is an Amityville Horror collection. It's a 4-disc set, and I really like the artwork on this and the cover. And here's the back. But the reason it's a 4-disc set is that the 4th disc is like this thing called Amityville Confidential, and it's like, I don't know, just some documentary about the potentially, whatever. If they talk about the potentially real, real true nature of the story or whatever, I can't remember if they talk about just paranormal things in general, but that's what the first disc looks like. There's Amityville 2, Amityville 3D, which of course isn't in 3D, and here's Amityville Confidential. Oh, here you go. What really happened? So it's like, it's like History Channel stuff. So that came out, box set, to basically at the same time as the remake was coming out. I really like the package of that. Then of course, I will go on to get this, which was the first Blu-ray released by, looks like, Metro MGM and 20th Century Fox at the same time. Basically a bare bones Blu-ray, which is, it should be said that, the very first time this got like a HD transfer was, the first film would be this. The transfer on this DVD that comes in that collection is a different transfer from this one, and it's touted as being HD. So that transfer from that DVD is the same one on here. Obviously this is, since gone on to be viewable in high definition. So in my brief review about the, and then of course the disc for the in the Shout Factory Amityville Horror Trilogy Blu-ray looks like this, and obviously it's going to be the exact same, as far as I can tell, the exact same master from the MGM DVD. And I think this audio commentary with Dr. Hans Zoller, yeah, that commentary is not exclusive to the Shout Blu-ray because it's on this DVD from the Amityville Horror collection. So I don't know if there's anything exclusive and special features wise to this particular Shout Factory Blu-ray. It's the same transfer, I would imagine, as from the MGM Blu-ray, and the audio commentary has got, For God's Sake, Get Out documentary, but I think that probably was, I don't know. So I'm not sure, I don't know enough about, special features on previous releases or not to know if any of these features on here are exclusive to this release. But I like, I like the cover because it's got that 70s poster look, and it's probably one of the one of the poster designs, I would imagine. And then this is, kind of cool as well. You got I really like the art on the disc there. And some of Scream Factory's Blu-rays did this. But this features because when this came out, the Amityville Horror Collection, I think it was the first time they made the movie 5.1. This the Blu-ray obviously features the Shout Factory Blu-ray, and this one, I think. Yeah, they both feature the newly done DTS HD master audio 5.1, and then the mono. Of course, you know, I'm an original mono guy, so I don't really go in for necessarily the 5.1 remixes of these old movies. But the image quality of the first movie on Blu-ray, you know, so basically I've got 3 versions here: a DVD with that transfer and 2 Blu-rays with that transfer. Is always, the contrast always was kind of off to me, and in a lot of ways I almost like the original DVD, the image on the original DVD that came out in 2000 more than the HD transfer that's come out since. So I'm not going to say that the HD transfer, the transfer on the Blu-rays are really that amazing. To me, they seem, compared to the the DVD that came out in 2000, it seems like the color is a little not very saturated, and the contrast is kind of not very good in my opinion. So some of the, it's not a transfer that blows, of the Blu-ray that blows your ass off in my opinion. Particularly because, like I say, I would regard the color, the saturation, and the contrast and stuff on the original DVD from 2000 to be better. Obviously, the clarity is going to be better on the Blu-ray, but I don't think that, the transfer is something to really get too crazy excited about. Obviously, it does the job. So that's pretty much my review of the movie, the Amityville Horror, and then the Blu-ray that came out, that is a part of this Amityville Horror trilogy that came out, I think, in 2013 by Scream Factory. So obviously in my review of Amityville 2 and also the movie 3D, I'll talk about the Blu-rays that go along with those movies, in this trilogy package as well. So thank you very much for watching my review of the Amityville Horror and Shout Factory Blu-ray, and as always, we'll catch you next time.
I think it's Amityville or something.
I don't know how you pronounce it. How do you pronounce it?
It's not Amityville, I don't think.
You know how you pronounce that? Amityville Horror? No idea.
Well, he doesn't even see the movie. Nope. Nope, he's gone for 2.